The president of the National Council of Women of New Zealand is Suzanne Manning. Suzanne joins us right now. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Kia ora, Pat. Kia ora, Chewie. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too. There was, I think, the announcement by Winston Peters today for a members bill, which of course means lots of things. It means it has to get drawn and then it has to go through. So there's every chance that this actual bill will never see the light of day. But I think Winston Peters knows what is red meat to his audience, and so he's thrown it out there. We'll get to that shortly, because I think we should at least first of all have a bit of a quick look. We won't play any audio, but a quick look at the reason that Winston's fired off the need for his penis police again, which are going to be in every public toilets in New Zealand if he had his way. The penis police will be there. By having a very quick 30-second look to remind people, or if you were under a rock at the end of last week and didn't hear it, why he is doing this, and that's from a ruling that came out in the UK. UK's top court says definition of woman is based on biological sex. And just in a nutshell, a unanimous decision, 5 judges ruled in the UK Equity Act, ruled that the UK Equity Act mean trans women can be excluded from some groups and single-sex spaces such as changing rooms, homeless shelters, swimming areas, and medical or counselling services provided only to women. The court said the ruling did not remove the rights for trans people still protected from discrimination under UK law. That's where you kind of go, but isn't excluding them discriminatory? So this is where it's going to be figured out, I guess. But it said certain protections should apply only to biological females and not to transgender women. Of course, there is one sector, especially in the UK, where these voices are very loud, as Chewie always point out, who are celebrating this as the be-all and end-all win, when even the courts are saying neither side should really celebrate this, because this is not a win or a final, call. Because the question then raises, how are they going to implement this? But first of all, Suzanne, I know that was in last week, but to kind of talk about Winston, we should probably talk about that first. You got any thoughts about that ruling in the UK, what it may mean? Anything at all you want to share?
It's the ruling in the UK, we do tend to follow them in a lot of ways in terms of knee-jerk reactions. Keep coming this way. It happened with puberty blockers, and suddenly it's all in here, and it's sort of like, hang on, we weren't having a problem. It was UK having the problem, and suddenly it comes here. But it's interesting, this overseas global shift that is happening in a lot of places and how it comes here. I noticed that Winston Peters called it a return to common sense. Well, at the Committee for the Status of Women, that's CSW, in New York this year, so that's the biggest gathering of women's organisations and representatives globally, which gets held on an annual basis. And our reps that all went there this year came back saying the major theme was the backlash globally against gains and progressions for women's rights. So there's this conservative turn, this trend to undo all the gains that women's rights have had. So what Winston is calling common sense, our women representatives at CSW this year were calling a backlash against women's rights.
There has been many points made about this ruling in the UK. When these kinds of rulings come in, what they're ultimately going to be used for in public is to discriminate against anybody who doesn't fulfill what that particular group describes as feminine looking. There's been lots of examples through the world of, a butch lesbian or a particularly tall, muscular female being called out for being trans, and they haven't been. And it seems that, for want of a, I guess, less accusatory term, you'll get a lot of the trad wife saying, if you don't look like a trad wife, then you're a danger to a trad wife type thing. If you're not the perfect example of 50s femininity, then we've got every right to question you. And that seems to be where these kinds of rulings have been leading around the world.
And that it is a real problem, because everybody does know the stories of that sort of stuff where people are questioned just because the way they look. I mean, I keep my hair short, right? Because it's the way I prefer and it's easy, and I have ever since my kids started as babies pulling my hair. And many of my mothers, my mother friends have done the same. And yet there's this thing about long hair in women and short hair in men. And so who actually really cares about that? But there is this definition that goes out there as to how we can tell men and women by hair length, even when we all know, there's diversity there. But so when we start ruling, we've already ruled on what clothes one can wear. So like the gang patch thing, anything that looks like a gang patch, even if it's not a gang patch. I do know of some friends who had gang patch looking gear, two of them talking at a service station filling up their motorbikes, and they ended up in prison for the night because they did that. So where do you stop? Absolutely. Where do you stop?
Yeah. Chewie?
I think we're sometimes quite naive in the fact that this sickness that the world seems to be catching, the US and the UK, won't transmit to us. But since we follow both of these countries' leads, because they're so dominant in our media and in our discussions, and our politicians are certainly paying attention to that sort of thing, I don't think that we can be complacent. I guess and this is a very selfish question for me to ask, as someone that obviously supports women, whether they're trans or not, how can a man take his role in this conversation? Because that's something that's quite often used against us. It's like, oh, here come the lefty beardy men, tell us how to do it. What's the best way to help? I want to help.
We do need men speaking to men. It is always a big thing, because one of the things I think about with this ruling against trans women, and a lot of it is the fear mongering, because there are some women who perceive trans women to be a threat in their spaces, and they're a threat because they think of them as men. So the logical thing there is men are a threat. We are afraid of men.
Yeah.
And men who are the stereotypical masculine bearded men. But you're lefty bearded men, so that's okay, But the more men call in, call out, talk to other men about what's appropriate behaviour, I mean, like, that is the biggest thing. If men took responsibility for their behaviour, all this trans women, trans men, who would care? Because we wouldn't be scared. And that's probably not a great answer, but there you are.
But one of the things that seems to be a reality is what this community who are celebrating this decision are actively saying is the trans community are just wanting to harm us.
Yep.
And if not the trans community, men pretending to be trans just want to get into our spaces and harm us. Yeah. And we hear that with all the, the pedo conversations around the world, or the sex offender conversations, where they're actually saying, if you're in this people group is trans, then you are a danger. And that's what they're saying, where you speak to most trans women I've spoken to, and you're like, what are you going to the bathroom for? And they're like, because I need to pee. And I use the stall exactly. And I go to the bathroom. And what you're just saying, Suzanne, I think is the reality is these people that are a threat perhaps to women in their isolation are not trans women. They are men breaking the law who will probably continue to break the law, and maybe the trans community will continue to get the blame for it.
I often think that people saying that men will dress up at women as women just so that they can go into a changing room to attack women. I don't think that they've thought that through. If you look at the offender stats, men dressed as men are the main attackers of women. So why would you bother? Why would you bother going and spending money on a nice dress so that you can do something that you could do in your normal pants? You know, it's like, why bother? There's so much easier route if you want to attack men. If you want to, like, for example, I'm heterosexual, so, you know, men are cool. And if somebody wanted to take me into, take me off in a quiet place to rape me and wanted to get my trust, he could come on as a man because that's who I'm going to go with, right? In fact, he would get much more chance as a man than if he dressed up as a woman. So again, why bother? Just people who are doing this are just in a fantasy world as far as I can see. You know, the people who are saying that this would happen are really just making up stories.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's all couched within concern for women, safety for women, that sort of thing. So, yeah, is the evidence that this is an issue? I mean, I get people, like, I had a conversation with someone that works in a sort of counselling space and that sort of thing, at a women's counselling space, and there was concern there about, well, if we're having a group counselling session, you know, people are scared of men, and then there is a trans person there, you know, does that happen often enough for it to be top-down legislated from Parliament? Or is this something that can be dealt with on a case-by-case basis by the people that are frontlining this stuff?
Yeah.
Is the case now? It just doesn't seem to be a problem.
As far as I know, there is no evidence. But, you know, the people, New Zealand First, who are making this legislation, putting it in, surely they've done their homework. Can they provide us with evidence? That would be nice, because I don't see it. It's just not an issue. When you talk to women, I don't know of one person who has been in any way offended by a trans woman. I know plenty who have been afraid of cisgender men who are just being their normal macho masculine self plenty of times. So there's stories all over there. So no, the numbers game don't work out. Neither does the definitions, you know, like the this biological female. It's just and what does that actually mean?
Well, it makes it sound sciencey then.
It does, yes.
And obviously science 100% agrees that there are only two genders.
I looked up
common sense.
I looked up the stats in the last census, the 2023 census. 0.4% of the New Zealand population identified as intersex. That is, they have some biological, whether that's genetic, hormonal, physical, or all of the above, attributes that make it ambiguous. So you cannot actually say that they are binary one way or another. So, like, for these intersex people, what are they supposed to do when they're out and about if it becomes a rigid, we've got the penis police in every bathroom. What if
that's copyright? That's copyrighted, by the way. If you're going to use that, there has to be a little copyright at the end. Just check it.
Okay.
You have to pay us a license fee.
You're right. So what about that? I mean, we're going to be able to tell who are the intersex people in our society. They're the ones with the wet pants because they can't go to the toilet out in public. It's like,
I sent an email today to Jenny Marcroft. I sent and called her off as well. She's the New Zealand First MP who is said to be presenting this, fronting it, yeah. And I really have one question, which is, what problem are you trying to solve?
It's a
like
good
with this
question.
legislation? What problem are you trying to solve? Because what they're talking about in the UK, and these people who are now celebrating that they're going to be single sex changing rooms, for example. Now, we've done this many times on this show before, but I'll just use the term that they're using. So if you are born female, female, born male, male. So we're going back to single sex changing rooms. That means all of these people are going to be in the female changing room because these are all trans men.
Oh, that looks good.
And lots of them, some of them, I don't know them all personally, have penises. Because some trans men go through a procedure where they get a penis.
Yep.
So if what you're trying to solve, the problem is single sex spaces, logic dictates that these people are now in the women's changing room.
Yep.
And it dictates these people are in the men's changing room.
Yep. That'd
So,
be fun, wouldn't it?
well, I actually was talking to someone over the weekend. I was wondering if trans men should actually just, as a protest, just in force, start using the women's bathroom and go, well, we've been told, I am sort of tongue in cheek because I know that people want to protect their identities and that kind of stuff. But what problem are you trying to solve? Is it about single sex spaces? Well, those people, trans men who are full of testosterone, probably more testosterone than me and Chewie, not hard, but because they're taking it synthetically and stuff, they're buff, they're big, that's now that those people are now women's changing rooms, female changing rooms. So what problem are you trying to solve here, Whānau? That's what I want to find out.
And not only that, but what problem will you create? Because if that was going to happen, then as we discussed earlier, how are we going to tell between a cisgender man and a trans man coming in to use our facilities? And we've already talked about it's the cisgender men that we're most worried about. So because you can't tell, it will be like just nothing. There won't be single sex.
Yeah. So for something that they're talking about, it's about safety. Ultimately, it's going to make people more unsafe.
Yes. Yeah.
They'll just
absolutely.
be the trans people or the people that don't meet someone's image of what a man is or what a woman is. I mean, there's just such a mixture of like, oh, we're going to talk about biology and we're going to talk about what a woman is and what a man is. And you're mixing biology with a social marker. Like this is the whole thing. Like girl, woman, man, boy, all of this sort of stuff. It's a construct. And they're trying to mix that up with biology and they're getting that wrong as well. And at the end of the day, it's just culture war. It's just punching down on people. And here we go round the merry-go-round again. And this is a government that says, hey, look, we're laser focused on the cost of living. It's all about the economy. And all they're doing is they're just hitting us with culture war after culture war. It's either Māori or it's trans people. There's some other minority that doesn't fit in the majority box that we're going to punch down on. Tired of this. I just want people to be able to exist without being attacked by government.
That would be nice. It would also be nice for us to be able to trust professionals that we spend so much time training up. So, for example, judges are the ones who are deciding on interpretations, like the Supreme Court here in UK. But the interpretations of woman or whatever, unless there is a definition that you're going to put in which case they have to abide by the definition. So just the mere fact if they're going to define a woman, not a man, I think, just a woman.
Yeah, that's an interesting bit as well, isn't it?
Yeah. So to define a woman means that we don't trust our judges to be able to use common sense. So instead of going with common sense, they're sort of like, we just don't want anybody to talk about trans people. So we're going to define a woman, so nobody's allowed to talk about trans people. And then, so what happens when the judges and everybody else are faced with actual real trans people?
Yeah. The thing as well is there's a very good hour, if people want to look it up on YouTube, James O'Brien, who we love on the show, who is LBC, I think is the talkback radio station in the UK. He did a whole show whilst the announcement was being made. And just by chance, I came across it in the weekend. And the first 2 hours of his 3-hour show was talking about the ruling in the UK. And it's a really, really interesting listen to people phoning in and this question being asked, what are you going to do now? How are you going to monitor this? Because then you have to get into how are you going to check with the people, who they are and if they're coming into the right room. How all these things, how are they all going to pan out? Is someone going to have to check pants? What if the pants look right? And it goes, it's just a horrible thing to even think about. Even though that's not what anyone's suggesting, but the idea of that sort of happening. And there was one particular lady on it who's a trans woman, but she transitioned. They get papers in the UK which enables them to change their sex marker. They can't self-identify their sex marker, but if they go through some paperwork, they can. So she's female now on her birth certificate. And she just phoned up of a previous caller who said, well, only females in my changing room. And so she phoned up straight away and she said, yeah, well, that's me. I'm a trans woman. No one that I know right now knows I'm a trans woman. I've got a F marker, so I'm in the same changing room. So it's literally, again, how do you process this? What do you think this is going to achieve? What are you trying to solve and how are you going to do it? And I don't know what they think they've got.
I don't think it's been well thought through at all. It's full of holes. And the thing is, it's just ideologically based. It is not about evidence. It's not about evidence of the problem, as we've been talking about. It's just that they have a belief that gender should be binary and therefore they're going to enforce it, except they don't have a means to enforce it. It's like, if I think it will become, or it's not going to happen. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, I want to say one more thing. I don't know if we need to go and look at Winston Peters' tweet. I mean, maybe we shouldn't give him any airtime. We've kind of covered off what we've mostly covered off. But I want to say one more thing, because one of the common refrains you hear from within the LGBT, the trans community, is they're trying to eliminate us. They're trying to make us disappear. And everyone always kind of goes, no, you're not. No, we're not. You can still be here. Just, do it our way. And I just thought, I was actually listening to that James O'Brien show. I just thought for the first time, well, hang on. You're trying to disappear them from the changing rooms. And you're trying to disappear them from the sports teams. And you're trying to, so you're actually trying to disappear them from all of these individual locations and spaces they're allowed to be. So even if you don't realize this, conservatives, what that does, as soon as you take them out of one space, then they're a little bit less visible. And take them out of another space, they're a little bit less visible. If you do that enough times, a little bit less visible, eventually invisible. So it is exactly what you're doing, whether you're aware, whether I'm gracious and say you may not be aware of it, but let's just be clear. Just because it takes, you eat an elephant a mouthful at a time, eventually you can possibly eat the whole elephant. Just because you're disappearing the trans community one opportunity at a time means eventually your objective is to disappear them overall.
I think the other danger there too is the less that you come in contact with trans people, the more they are this scary thing because you don't know. Because when you know a trans person, all your fears go away because actually, they're just normal, nice people. But if you don't know them, you can make them into monsters. And when we've done that before with so many other groupings, make them invisible, and then you can make up all sorts of stories about them. And I tell you just one thing that is saying you're going on to the Pope next. I just want to Mihi to the Pope. He was a great man. And one of the things, because I am Catholic, more out of familiarity than agreement with everything that happens in the Catholic Church. But that Pope, Pope Francis, pushed gender roles as much as he could on theologically sound grounds, and he made a difference. And he just challenged all these traditional conservative gender roles. He's sort of like, well, why do we do it like this? We don't need to do it like this. I'm going to do it different. And so we should do more of that, challenging. And in fact, a lot of this transgender or how you do masculinity, how you do femininity is about that challenging. What's important, what's not. People are important.
Suzanne, it's been lovely having you here this evening. Chewie, is there anything else you'd like to add or say before we wrap up?
Yeah, I want to point out a couple of things that this is a new argument. This like, you go back 20, 30 years, there wasn't these discussions about trans people. We didn't call them then by that name at that point, but there wasn't the fear mongering that there is now. It's more weaponized, it's more pointed, it's more spread. You know, I've seen clips of an old Sally Jesse Raphael interview with a trans woman. I've seen a documentary, one of the pioneers of electronic synthesizer music was trans, and that was in the 70s, and that was just not even, it wasn't even an interesting part of that documentary. It was just the early footage. The person that they were talking about was a man. The later footage is the same person, but it's a woman now. People just looked at it as a quirk. Maybe they thought they were weirdos, but they certainly didn't think that they were a threat.
Here in Wellington, we've got Carmen on our traffic lights up in Cuba Street. Celebrated as a Wellington icon.
We can't talk about New Zealand politics and trans issues without talking about Georgina Byer. You know,
Celebrated.
That sort of, yeah. So why are we taking this great leap backwards? Why is Winston charging into this particular windmill at this particular time?
Yeah.
Oh, can I answer?
Baffling.
Can I answer? Votes. That's all it is. I mean, like, I don't know him personally. I've never hung out with him, but I used to live in Tauranga and I've worked in broadcasting for long enough that I've had dozens of interactions with Winston. He doesn't believe this shit. This is not him. This is not what he's all about. This is about votes. This is about him securing a legacy that goes on beyond him with a political party that still exists. This is not his bag. Because you know what he does as he hits it was Asians, 15, 20 years ago, and then it was migrants, and and you notice how they all just fall away because they're not the issue of the day to throw red meat to his base.
Yeah.
I don't believe this is what Winston's passionate about at all. I believe that he is a old man shouting at clouds, trying to hang on to a legacy which probably should have been put into the dust heap several years ago. That's what I think.
And at the National Council of Women, we are getting a bit tired of this because we've got a lot of things that we want to improve for women, and then we suddenly have to defend or switch focus to these non-things. We've got a midwife crisis in the country. We need to solve finding, training, supporting midwives. Who cares what they call the people giving the babies? Let's get the midwives sorted, So we're being pulled away from the real issues, and that's what we're not thrilled about.
And Suzanne, I apologise for dragging you away from the important issues to talk about this tonight, but it would
I love talking with you.
It would only be appropriate though. Just what else? Okay, so let's just put a stake in the ground and say the government wakes up tomorrow morning and focuses on some issues for women that will actually make a meaningful difference. What should they be focusing on?
So the Te Ao Rerikura is the elimination of sexual and family violence plan. We need much more resources into that. We need an independent media regulator so that we can have online safety for our women. We need better maternity services, actually the whole of life reproductive health for women. And I will include trans women on that one, to just because we feel it's underserved. So those are the three off the top of my head, and if we had another hour, we'd have a few more.
Well, maybe we should revisit this in the next wee while, and we can see about what actually is important, and we don't have to just be responsible. Because I mean, to be honest with you, if I was still doing talkback, this would be great talkback fodder. But it's like we don't do talkback per se here. We actually want to talk about things that matter as well. So maybe we get you back on and we talk about a more important issue. I mean, this is important for the trans community and to support our trans whānau, but when it comes to things that most of the country is worried about, this doesn't rate. It only rates for a very small, very loud minority of people who want to disappear the trans community, one mouthful at a time.
I went and looked at the petitions, and so there was a petition from a group for this particular bill. I think 2,500 people signed it. So 2,500 people in this country thought it was worthwhile. The rest didn't.
And then you get 300,000 that signed the treaty against the treaty principles bill, and fucking Winston Peters and David Seymour go, "Oh, there's clearly the feeling in this country for a debate on this." No,
it was an overwhelming.
There's not. There's not. Hey, Suzanne, thanks so much for being part. Hey, look, just tell us, in case people want to know more, the National Council of Women of New Zealand. What do you guys actually do? And are you like a group that has membership? How do people find out more about what you do?
So thank you. Look, see on that site that you've got there is join us. You can come and be a member for as little as $10 a year, because we want to make it accessible to everybody. So you can join as an individual. We also have organisations who join us up. So what we like to say we're doing is amplifying the voices of women to policymakers. And so we work at that system level, the political policy. We work across all government parties, all ministries, and with other NGOs, with funders. So we try and be as broad as possible. And as I say, we've got organisations, women's organisations as part of us as well. So what we do is advocate for things that will make life better for women. But generally, we see it as making life better for all genders, because if we have gender equality, it will be better for all genders. So we don't see ourselves as just one. And another thing that we really strong for us is advocating for intersectional femininity, feminism, not femininity, feminism, because we don't have gender equality when our Pacific sisters are paid less than their Pākehā sisters. So we look at disabled women, we look at the rainbow community, we look at different ethnic groups. It's got to be gender equality across the board. By the time you get that, you know, we've got gender equality for all genders, hopefully.
Suzanne, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate your time. Thanks for picking up the phone today, and we will talk again super soon, eh?
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, all the best.
Cheers, Susan.